Hello, everybody. Welcome to Monday Night Live from a very sunny 28 degrees in Swanage. I'll just show you the picture outside of our studio window. It's absolutely fantastic. We can't wait to get out there. So tonight, I've been following super successful people all around the world for a number of years. And tonight I've got one of those with me, Patricia Fripp, who's enjoying the sun in Swanage, surprised about the weather. And I've got Patricia's latest book here, which I recommend everybody to get a copy of, Deliver Unforgettable Presentations, which we all need to do. And don't forget, you may not be a professional speaker, but you're a presenter, whether you're presenting to your kids, to your nieces and nephews, and whether you're presenting to clients or to the local Rotary Club. We've had a great day. We had a mastermind group, which started as breakfast in the Pines Hotel, which is a fabulous hotel. Then we went to Dorchester. Godfrey showed us around Poundbury, which is the King's, I don't know what you call it, Godfrey. You'll put me right on that. All the areas owned by the King.
Yeah, it's part of the Duchy of Cornwall, and it's his architectural heritage and development that started over 20 years ago, and it's due to finish in 2025, but it's pretty full at the moment. Full employment, great place to visit, lots to see.
Definitely worth a visit. And then we went into the middle of Dorchester and went to the Shire Hall, which was where people were tried, looked at some pretty interesting situations. Godfrey dressed up as the judge. Then we went to the Wise Man at West Stafford, and now we're on here. But I remember what my mother said: if you stick around with smart people, you catch their smart stuff. And that's what we've been doing today. So I'm with Patricia Fripp, who needs no introduction. She's been over here in the UK for 3 weeks. Patricia, thanks for joining us on Monday Night Live. Patricia, the first question I want to ask you is, who influenced you the most?
I was very lucky, Derek. I had two magnificent parents. And my father, who was a self-made successful entrepreneur in the real estate business, the first day I went to work to serve my apprenticeship, as he pushed me out the door to get the number 24 bus to Bournemouth, said, in your career, don't concentrate on making a lot of money. Rather concentrate on becoming the type of person people want to do business with, and you most likely will make a lot of money. And that has been the foundation of how I've tried to build my businesses. And my mother, who was smart in a whole different way, and my mother would have been me if she had been born when I was born. And she said, of course, it's the inner you that counts. However, you always have to dress up and look good so that you attract people, and then they will find out how nice you are, how smart you are, and how valuable you can be to them.
Okay, well, you set off for America when you were 20. I know you've been working in Jersey, and you met some interesting people. And I remember that you were recommended to Jay Sebring, who was a most famous hairdresser who was over
well, not exactly.
Okay.
Not exactly. When I first arrived in America, in San Francisco, no job, nowhere to live, didn't know anyone, $500 and a pair of scissors, and I got a license to use them. And my first boss, Mr. Paul at the Mark Hopkins Hotel, said, because I had discovered that hairdressers work on 50% commission. That was a license to steal. And he said, Patricia, I want you to go back to England, bring over 27 of your friends, and I'll become a multimillionaire. And I said, Charles, I've never worked with anyone who works as hard as I am. So you're lucky to have me. Then my next job, age 23, was in the first fancy men's hairstyling industry. The first fancy salon. Men's hairstyling was a new industry. And the founder of that industry, for the most part, was Jay Sebring. Hollywood hairstylist, did all the movie stars' hair. And he took over our salon.
Ah, okay. Okay.
And so Jay Sebring inherited me. And frankly, these were very chauvinistic times. He might not have hired me, but he inherited me. And he taught me a valuable lesson. He said, we only have one gimmick, the best haircut in town. But it wasn't what he said that was so fascinating as who he said it to. Time magazine, Newsweek, Playboy magazine, when no one else was talking about men's hairstyling. And he said, as soon as Herb Kane, which is the local, at the time, popular columnist, everyone read Herb Kane, even if they didn't read anything else in the paper. And he said, as soon as Herb Kane puts a notice that I've taken over the salon, the phone will ring off the hook, which it did. At our opening party, Paul Newman, Joanne Woodward, what was his name? Anyway, I told you.
You told us at lunchtime, yeah.
Anyway, it was absolutely spectacular, and we were on the map. And then, if you are old enough to remember, and perhaps you didn't know in England, but there was one night, and of course he still had his home in Los Angeles, and he would fly back to Los Angeles on a Friday and come back for Monday morning. And this day we stood at the end of our booze, and he kissed me on the cheek and said, "You are doing terrific haircuts." Now that was like being acknowledged by God. And then he went to my best friend, Frankie, worked in the next booth, who Frankie had given him a mug that was sandblasted in gold leaf, Mr. Sebring. And he handed Frankie the mug and said, "Will you look after this till I come back on Monday?" And then Saturday morning, Frankie and I used to go to breakfast. And we got to the salon, and it was 10 minutes to 10. I was in on my second haircut, Joe Oliver. The phone rang and I picked it up. It was a friend of mine from a radio station in Ukiah. And he said, "Have you heard the news?" I said, "What news?" "About my boss." "What about my boss?" And that was when we learned that Jay Sebring with Sharon Tate, who was his ex-fiance and good friend, had just been murdered by the Manson.
Oh, wow.
And so Frankie said, "You will become the star of the salon," which started me on the world of PR and radio and television. However, Jay Sebring, when he said, "We only have one gimmick, the best haircut in town," I began to realize it doesn't matter how good we are or what we do, the world has to know about it. And that's when I became what I now call a shameless self-promoter. I might not have done it at that time, but I do now.
So a little girl from Wimborne
Yes.
goes to America and becomes a shameless self-promoter. I know.
Yes.
I know. And you can't tell that to our groups in England, because they'll be seriously embarrassed, because we're shy and reserved.
Oh, yeah, it's disgusting.
As you know.
It's disgusting.
Now, one of the things
Yes.
I tell people in the UK is to
You mean one of the pieces of advice you
one of
tell
the pieces
people?
of advice I tell people in the UK is to have 3 business cards. I got that from you.
Yes.
Share it with today's audience, please.
When I was a hairstylist, I had my own business. Nobody had to teach me what I did. When I cut someone's hair, and I had very beautiful business cards, I would say, "Here are 3 business cards, 1 for you and 2 for the next 2 people who tell you how good your hair looks." And then the next one, I say, "Here's 3. Oh, no, I know. I still have my last card. It's for the 3 people who tell me my hair looks good." And so often, Derek, in every industry, people say, "Well, refer me." And the question is, if I tripped over the perfect prospect for you, how would I recognize them? But even now, you could say, "Here, Mr. Arden, here are my 3 business cards. 1 for you, for when you need me again, and 2 for the next people who say to you, 'I need a good lawyer. Do you know one?'" And what we have to do is be very specific with who our prospect is. And if you have an extra business card, who do you give it to?
Absolutely. I'm just having a little technical issue here, so I'm trying to deal with it, but we won't worry. And we can all use that in every walk of life. Now, in England, I've given that example. People will have looked at me. The body language goes, "Is he loopy?" And in fact, lots of people don't have business cards now. That's another,
no, they don't. Irritating.
And I think they're losing a competitive advantage by not giving somebody a small card to put in their wallet to remind them later of of that. So
because people say, well, let's collect on LinkedIn, that's good, but you really want to put people in your database and code them a certain way.
or on your newsletter. We're only doing this because I had a newsletter list, and on the 23rd of March, I emailed it, and everybody signed up, and so you're here for that reason. Now, talking about speaking, but this is not specific to speaking. You do an early warm up with the audience. David Heiner says, don't be on time, be early.
Yes.
The competitive advantage of any negotiation situation of getting there early, connecting and building rapport, but you do that in a specific way.
Well,
What way is that?
certainly as a speaker, I'm a great believer in you get to the room. Now, if you're speaking a convention, go to the room the night before and make friends with the stage. Be very familiar with the room. You will sleep better. Then you get there early so that once you've got your PowerPoint and everything set up, then you talk to the audience. This is what I call the schmooze factor, or act as your own warm-up act. Now, Darren LaCroix, my co-author in Deliver Unforgettable Presentations, calls it before rapport. But this is very good for two reasons. One, it is very difficult for a speaker to go from nothing to delivery mode. And you'll, by just schmoozing and talking, welcoming, thank you, what is your interest in the subject? Thank you for selecting this session. You are warming up your body and your voice. And it is wonderful for the audience because we both are fans of Cialdini. It's the laws of reciprocation. The fact that you are interested in your audience, they feel obligated to give you their attention at the beginning of the speech. Now, they don't feel obligated to hang on your every word for 90 minutes unless you deserve that, but at the beginning. And even if you're not talking to them, they can see that you are in the crowd and you're interested in them.
And of course, this also implies to any negotiation, any business situation. If you're there early, you'll be respected. And the first law of Cialdini is, do they like you? And actually, they're going to like you a lot more if you're there early and respectful. And of course, I would move maybe some of the chairs round. I might get the coffee ready, even if I'm in their offices and there's no one there. Why not? Why not take advantage of the situation, feel comfortable, etc. as well.
You know, what I often used to do, I was very big in advertising specialties. I was even written about in advertising specialty magazines and spoke for the advertising specialty industry. But I had some big clips called "Don't Get Clipped, Get Fripped." I had tip cards with mine, and I would put them on the front few rows. And then I would go to the back of the room and say, you know, here's a nice gift if you sit in the first row. And I would even get people by the hand and say, you know, your speaker's very short. If you don't sit up front, you're not going to get your money's worth. And I would bring people from the back to sit at the front. Now, you have to be there early enough.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And if it's a small training event, then I would move the rub round to my satisfaction.
Yes.
Not leave it to somebody else. Now, you talk about an interesting statistic or an unknown fact to start talks with.
Well, there are many ways to begin a presentation. And this would work with a sales presentation. It would even work if you're running team meetings. And it is an interesting statistic or little known fact. However, whenever you use an interesting statistic or little known fact, add an emotion. Would it interest you to know? Would it surprise you to know? Would it amaze you to know? Would it shock you to know? Would it disgust you to know? Now, if you were talking about the amount of rubbish or what we're doing to the environment, you could use that. And because you know I'm a great promoter in you-focused language, anytime we hear you, it's almost like we reconnect. What? Would it interest you to know? Oh, what? They pay attention again. And of course, you have to put the pause in. My speech coach from years ago, Ron Arden, used to say, an audience is like a cow. It loves to be milked. Have I told you that one
No,
before?
never heard it before.
Yeah.
Never heard it
In
before.
other words, that's what I call minking the audience. You're having them lean forward. Oh, what? Interest you to know.
Would it interest you to know that here in Swanage, Winston Churchill and President Eisenhower walked down the platform in 1944 to check out there how the D-Day landings were progressing? Hardly anyone knows that.
I know, but last time you took me on a steam train trip, and I said, Derek, in this station at Cove Castle, there's a picture of Winston Churchill.
There you are, you see.
Mhm.
So that's, and you start that as soon as you're introduced?
Well,
or do you say, welcome, my
no,
name's
I
Patricia,
don't know.
Patricia
No,
Fripp.
because they know who you are. Now, and Gary McKenzie and Carl Walsh and my speaker buddies know that even if you're in a breakout session and you have to introduce yourself, I would always say something of interest to the audience before you introduce yourself. In fact, what I did at the American Payroll Association recently, which I usually do, I get on stage and I'll say, because I've been schmoozing the audience and on the stage and informally, I say, as people come in, I say, no, this is just informal. We will formally begin at exactly 2 o'clock. And then I get on stage and say, well, I am usually introduced before I speak. So I will pretend I am somebody else and introduce me. You will then applaud profusely and I'll begin the presentation. And they always laugh. And then I introduce myself. They applaud. I walk to a different part of the stage and then I begin.
Fantastic. So another little bit of audio issues that we were having there. Let's talk about you focus language, because that's something, and I thought you told me a long time ago you had to have 5 U's to 1 I, and most people get it the other way round. Although last night when we were having a drink, you said that statistic's not right.
I don't get the example that I give is when I was helping somebody deliver a sales presentation. One of my friends who was a sales manager at the Fairmont Hotel called and said, help. As you know, I am a great salesperson one-on-one. However, I have the opportunity to deliver a sales presentation to a convention committee who are staying at the Fairmont Hotel. And they are seriously, they're considering bringing their convention to San Francisco. However, they're also seriously considering San Diego. And I get very nervous. And so I asked him the questions we should all ask ourselves. 1, who is the audience? Well, it's a convention committee. 2, how long do you have to speak? 8 minutes. Then 3, what are you really selling? It's not the Fairmont, it's San Francisco over San Diego. And then what many people think or forget to think, I said, what is it worth to the Fairmont Hotel if you get the business? He said, $500,000.
Wow.
I said, let me get this right. You have 8 minutes to make $500,000. That is $1,038.61 a second.
A second.
Even when
I thought you were going to say
you
that.
pause.
Yeah.
So this is how I said, because they knew him, he'd been showing them around. So I suggested he say, in the next 8 minutes, you will decide the best decision you can make for your associations and your members is to bring your convention to San Francisco in the Fairmont Hotel. That is 5 euros, 1 Fairmont. So I do not say every single time it has to be 5 to 1. That is the example. But if you work on the principle, and this is true in all walks of life, everybody else is more concerned with themselves than they are with us. That even when you write a letter or an email, write down what you're going to say, and then go back and say, how can you not use the word I, or how do you not use I at the beginning of each sentence and paragraph, and reorganize it.
And it's difficult, isn't it?
Yes, very often.
This isn't easy. No, I have the same problem every Monday morning when I write my newsletter. So
now, what did I suggest about your newsletter? One simple change. You were coming from Swanage, and what did I suggest?
Well, I can't remember, but I'm just going to tell the audience I got up at 5 o'clock yesterday morning and wrote my newsletter. And because of something that happened at home, I couldn't get my wife to proofread it. So I asked Patricia to proofread it over dinner last night when I was absolutely exhausted.
Yeah.
And it was like going back to school and having a lesson. And those of you that know Patricia probably knew what happened to me.
Well, it was just a matter of, you talking about from Swanage. I like adjectives, which you seem to be allergic to adjectives. And that is, well, if people don't know Swanage, what descriptive word, what adjective? Historic. This is an ancient, and of course, America doesn't know what ancient is, but ancient. So, but it's historic. A lot's happened here. Remember, you made me buy the book, or highly recommended.
I did.
About Swanage and the Wall. There's a lot of history. We're part of the Jurassic coast, which goes back how many years?
Oh, millions.
Billions. Exactly.
Yeah.
You can understand why historic was a good word.
Well, Godfrey came up at lunchtime with seaside, didn't he?
Yes.
That was his adjective. Do you think that was a good word?
Of course it is. Because it's true, and it helps people who don't know have a picture of it. And also my other suggestion is one idea a sentence.
So short, sharp sentences. I read once 14 words a sentence. Was that right?
Well, I very often clients send me the scripts, and I know I sent back to one 78 words in one sentence is too much. Yeah, but one idea a sentence.
Yeah.
Because why, Derek? Remember, because we speak to be what? Remembered and
recommended.
No, repeated. Remembered and repeated.
You can see we haven't rehearsed this. We should have rehearsed this, shouldn't we?
No, it's much more real life.
Good. Okay. Now, you also start with, would it interest you to know, don't you?
Yes, that's one of mine.
One of yours. What else?
Well, would it interest you to know? Because it's bringing the audience in. And another opening is, I wish you could have been there.
Yeah.
And then, and the principle behind this is, we're going to tell a story from our own life. However, we bring them into the scene with, I wish you could have been there. You have to make sure you're taking them somewhere they would want to go. Because I know somebody, got Fripp opening lines, I wish you could have been there. It was my father's funeral. Now, that would work at the end. If the audience knew throughout the speech that your father had a wonderful life, he had great happiness, success, lived long enough to see his children, perhaps his grandchildren successful. And then when you tell them, I wish you could have been there, the church was packed. Then you could take them to that scene.
You can see from my body language, I don't like that ending.
You
I do not like that ending at all.
That was an example of someone who did that. And I said it wouldn't work at the opening because we haven't got enough context, but it would at the end if you wanted to use it.
Now, one of my hugely successful people that have appeared on the leadership show 4 times is Tracy Hooper.
Oh, yes.
Tracy,
I'm a big fan of Tracy.
Tracy from Portland, Oregon.
Yes.
And she's got a book out called Words to Lose, Words to Use. Now, you tell me off for using words like stuff, shed loads, boatloads, and things like that people
and
use.
Things. It's never a thing. Yes.
I think I've done quite a good job cutting it out sometimes, but not other times. What's the problem with these sort of throwaway jargon?
Well, if you look at it, specificity builds credibility. When you are, if you think back to your years in the bank, if you as a younger person was going to go and do business with corporate boards, C-level audience, by being specific, it builds your credibility beyond the years. It's like a friend of mine said, who was very well dressed. He was talking to the gentleman who sold him the clothes, and he said, I can't tell the difference between the $1,400 suit and the $1,800 suit. And the brilliant salesman said, oh, sir, not many people can. However, the people you want to impress know the difference. And that's what it's the same with language. The people you want to impress, even if they don't speak that way, recognize it is a great way to speak. Plus, we are speaking to be remembered and repeated. Remember, one of the chapters, chapter 2, is clarity, clarity, clarity. Unless you are very clear and specific, people don't get the point, don't get the picture. Now, so I always say, if it weren't a thing, what would it be? That is my most frequently asked question of all my clients. As one brilliant engineer was saying, there are two things people love about. And he's talking about his product. I said, well, if they weren't things, what would they be? He said, innovative upgrades. Mm. I said, well, there are billions of people in the world. What people love your innovative upgrades? My mother wouldn't care. The window cleaner wouldn't care. He said, systems administrators, who is mostly in the audience. So can you understand that amount of specificity would again pull the audience in? And then it's never stuff. Except when Derek uses it, it's never stuff. That's what you do with your turkey at Christmas. You stuff it, Derek, then you can. There might be a time I would let you go when you say, is the garage is full of stuff. Then I would say rubbish, okay. But okay. Here are a few new, then of course, it's not a bunch. And it's not tons. If you can't weigh it, it's not tons. If it's not fruits and vegetables, it's not a bunch. Mm. Now, here are a few more that they might not have heard if on your show.
Let's go.
Don't say, I think, when people ask your opinion, especially if you're speaking to clients or to your senior leadership. I think such and such. No. Think is a girly word. Okay. Less confident. You say, based on my experience, this, or based on the extensive research, or based on the findings of our cross-functional team, this is what we recommend. It's building more credibility than just what you think. Now you think, but based on your experience, research, or the findings of the team you were reporting for.
I feel I use that word a lot. Anyway, we better move on.
Okay, you don't want one more?
Okay. All right, one more. Go on, quick.
One more. Because I work with a lot of technical people who, what we do in a lot of our businesses, we simplify the complexity of what we do or our product or service. But I say, especially if you're selling a product that could cost millions of dollars, which some of my clients do, or even 100,000. If you, in trying to explain it, you say simply or basically, I say, no, take those words out. You are simplifying your explanation to make it understandable for a less technical audience. However, if you put these words simply and basically in the conversation, people will often think, well, why does it cost so damn much?
Yeah. Good point. Great point.
So with that, shall I shut up?
No, because I've got a couple of questions. I want to ask you about the Colombo clothes, but before we go there, you invite questions not before the end. You invite questions before the end, and you talk about back pocket questions in one of your books.
Well, in the structure of a presentation, and there is a real structure. In fact, many brilliant speakers give great messages, but they don't truly understand the way a well-structured presentation should go. Because a well-structured presentation is built on a premise, a big idea, a central theme. And you go through your points of wisdom, which gives examples of what you're discussing. And then at the end, there is a process, and you will read all about it. It's not like you haven't heard me say it, but it's still in there.
Very
Yes.
much.
So in your review, you are going to ask, or you can, you don't have to, but you can ask a rhetorical question based on your premise. So perhaps your session, Derek, is in, what would the title of a negotiation session be?
Everything is negotiable.
Okay, good. Everything is negotiable. And you delivered your principles. And then you are saying, so why or how is everything negotiable? And now you're going to do a review. So that's a rhetorical question based on your premise, the big idea. Then you review. There's 6 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you say, I challenge you to take your notes, go back with your team and discuss what you believe you've learned, because the best way to reinforce what you learned is to teach it to someone else.
Fabulous.
So you're challenging them to take action. So, and then you say, we have 10 more minutes and this is what you can do. If you're going to say, well, now we got 10 minutes for your short, specific questions. And I would say we have 10 minutes before my concluding remarks, because very often people leave on the questions. They think it's over. No. And then, you know me, I say, what are your short, specific questions based on what you've heard? Now, if this is a longer seminar and it might be smaller and interactive, I will say, what are your short, specific questions based on what you've heard, which is this chunk of content? And if someone says, well, how do you open your presentation? That's the next subject. So and if people chat on, I say, and your question is, and your question is, and your question is. And sometimes I say, I'm sorry, your question is so high level, I don't know what you're saying. Can you restate this in a short, more specific
In other words, they're talking nonsense.
Yes.
I know, but that's a nice way of putting it.
However, there's another bonus in your back pocket. What you can always say is, we have 10 minutes. I can certainly happy to take your questions. Or would you like a bonus negotiation technique? And based on my 40 years
do they always take the
experience,
bonus?
90% of the time, if you give them a choice, they'll take a bonus, because they know that whenever you open up to the audience, you are all at the mercy at the quality of the questions. But now let me get to the point. So however you handle it, and then you might say, thank you for your interest in the subject, or thank you for your active participation. And then this is the last words linger. And you might challenge them again. Remember, whatever the challenge was, and then it can be a Columbo close, because it's almost like Columbo, if you're old enough to remember, although it lives in reruns, was a brilliant detective who would always, as he was leaving, it's over, he's leaving, he would say, just one more question, and that's when the crime was solved, because the person...
Sure.
Yeah. So the Columbus close is, it looks like you've closed, but it's just one more comment. And I do this with sales teams, which is remember, and it's the biggest advantage in doing business with them. But now, okay, remember, and this is your last words linger. And it is not a new idea. It's the number one philosophy or idea for your session.
Brilliant.
Brilliant.
I'm going to come back to you for one more tip, but I'm going to go over to John Baker, who's been sitting here very patiently in case the Zoom goes down. John, what have you taken away from today?
Would it interest you to know, Derek?
It would.
Whoa.
Yeah. Well, John, you've got a lot of notes on your pad.
Absolutely. I really loved Patricia's phrase, before rapport. And you used it in the context of, before you go and make a speech, you thank the people, you talk to them, you welcome them, and they feel really good. But I'd actually add something to that. So partly because I've done it myself when speaking, and by asking a few questions while you talk to them, you've got a huge amount of research. Suddenly, you've tailored the presentation even further. The second thing you can do quite easily is just name drop and add some names into what you're talking about, and the audience suddenly think, oh, he really does know what's going on. And that can be really, really powerful. Suddenly it feels very, very personal. But while you were talking about it, I thought it's not just for when you're speaking. There was some years ago where I was going in to do a sales pitch, and beforehand, you know what it's like. You sit down in the reception area and you can either just sit and chat to nobody, you can twiddle your thumbs and look a bit nervous, or you go and talk to the receptionist. And so I just went and chatted to the receptionist, asked a few questions politely. Then when sitting in the room with the MD, did the same thing, name dropped a couple of times and put in place what I'd learned. 3 weeks later, once I'd got the job, he said, one of the things we liked the best about that was you knew so much about the company, but more to the point, you had spoken to the receptionist. What you didn't know at the time was my wife.
Wow.
So always be nice to the receptionist, always.
Brilliant. That's fantastic, John. Thanks for that. And thanks for staying in our studio for us all this time. Thanks for joining Monday Night Live. Before I hand you over to Patricia for a 10-second clip, do join us at the Hideaway Cafe on Wednesday morning at 7:30 if you can get up that early. And on Friday, we will be at the Victory Services Club, and love to see anybody there for Samaritans, for Crisis and for Shelter. Patricia, you've got 10 seconds. Just one more thing, please.
It sounds as if your session on Friday, people will be getting better by doing good. And I hope they all put £5 or £10 in the hat on the way out. Because as I learned from my parents, their actions, not their words, you can't be too kind or too generous. Thank you for your invitation. And I love the studio in Swan.
Patricia Fripp, thanks for joining us. And I hope you'll join us after I've delivered you back to Heathrow Airport on Wednesday, again from San Francisco. Absolutely brilliant. And we'll